Good afternoon to my listeners and my viewers. I am Patricia Goings. I'm the host of A Place Called Through, and we're broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. We are a nonprofit network where we share stories of real people, real stories of real everyday life situations, and it's all made possible through those charitable donations. Of course, if you'd like to be a donator to our broadcast, please feel free to do so here at WYTV7.org. Today, we are favored to have with us Ms. Shay Stone, who is going to share her testimony and her story about a life situation that affects so many people nationwide. And that topic is depression, going through the state of depression. Ms. Stone, I welcome you today to A Place Called Through.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for having me. I just felt so good from the very first time that you and I have communicated. I can tell that you have a pure heart and you're doing this because you want to help people. And I appreciate you. I want you
most definitely. That is my mission in life, to help others. Someone had to help me go through. And so my desire is to do that, the same thing, help somebody else. And that's what A Place Called Through in WYTV7 is, and Christian Broadcasters Network is about, as we share stories from everyday life situations. So tell us about your depression and how did you find out that this what was going on with you? Where did it begin? Tell us about your story fighting with depression.
Okay, I'll walk you through from the very beginning. I was living in Eastern North Carolina. I'm a single parent, and it was just me and my daughter. And I lived in Eastern North Carolina for about 10 years. And I was there because of my career. I'm a radio broadcaster. So it took me to Eastern North Carolina. And just like everything else, my daughter grew up too. And she was a senior, and then she was out of school on her way to college. And I really wasn't in the dating scene when I was rearing her because I wanted my priority to be my daughter, and I didn't want anything to deviate from that. So I wasn't on the dating scene, and my daughter felt bad for me. And she was like, well, Mom, I'm going off to college, and I want you to start dating. I want you to find someone so you won't be alone. And I thought about it for a little while, and I ended up getting a cat. So when I got the cat, I also started praying, and I prayed to the Lord to send someone for me. And a week later, I got a Facebook message from someone that I was interested in. I had a crush on when I was in high school. And that's how it began, really. So the guy and I, we communicated often, long conversations. We talked about what we wanted for our lives, and he knew that I'm a faith-based person, and he was just agreeing with everything. So I was like, God answered my prayer, and it's someone that I had a crush on in high school. I'm winning. So I thought. So I ended up going to Washington State for a visit. I did that a couple of times. And I was in my 40s, and so was he, and I wasn't married, and my daughter was going on with her life. And I was like, I'm going to try to build a life with this guy. And I thought that was the thing to do because, like I said, I had a crush on him. But not only that, I'm from a small country town, and my mom knew his mom and dad, and his mom and dad knew my mom. So I was like, that's just very close-knit. So I took a chance, and I moved to Washington State. And when I went to Washington State, when I got off the airplane, I saw him. I hadn't seen him in years and years, and he had a dozen of red roses waiting on me. And I just knew this was another sign from the Lord that this was the thing that I needed to do. Well, we got in the car a few miles down the road, away from the airport. The car broke down. And we ended up getting the car fixed, but that was an unexpected expense. So we ended up getting back to his place. And when we got to his place, went upstairs, I was unpacking, and I that he had slipped downstairs. And I didn't say anything. And I just continued to do it. And I just noticed that he was down there for a while. So I walked downstairs and he was on the telephone. And I couldn't hear what was on the other end, but I heard his end. And the part that I heard was, I love you too. So when he got off the phone, I was like, who are you talking to? And he became livid that I even asked him that question. He got so livid that he cursed me out over it. And I'd only been in Washington State for a few hours. And that was all the sign that I needed. But I didn't listen to the sign right away. Keep in mind, everyone knew that I'd moved 3,000 miles away. I had a place that I had for 10 years. It was gone. I gave it up. I had a vehicle. I gave that up. All of my family, my friends were 3,000 miles away. The only person that I knew was this person that I was going to build my life with. And that lasted off and on. There were certain scenarios that would go on. And I realized that I had no business being there. And I realized something else. The little voice that told me to go was not God telling me to go, you know? And I've learned some pretty hard lessons, but the first 2 years were rough. And then about 2.5, 3 years later, I started getting physically sick. My body started breaking down. I was going to the hospital probably once a month, but I was going to the doctor's office 3 times a week. My body started mimicking other diseases. I was tested for MS. That was negative. I was tested for lupus. That was negative. I was tested for rheumatoid arthritis. That was negative. I was tested for thyroid. That was negative. I was tested for cancer. That was negative. But I did have high blood pressure. And I did have something that was depleting my potassium. And I don't know if you know anything about your potassium levels, but if you have too much sodium, it can be a problem. But if you don't have enough potassium, that's equally a problem as well, and it's life-threatening. So I would get these massive heart palpitations, but not only that, my heart would start skipping a beat. And then it felt like I thought I was having a heart attack.
That was because your heart was racing and then you're fighting with the hypertension as well. Can we go back and let me take you back a step, because you had mentioned earlier that you thought that, you were hearing this from God. This was someone that, family friendly, everybody knew him. He was a well-liked person. You liked him, and you put more trust in man than you did what you were hearing, because it was like when you got there, the car broke down. When you moved in, then you overheard this conversation. So not only is your mind reacting here, your body, and I understand with depression, it does cause those kind of symptoms and actual things. And I think I did read somewhere in there that, depression really, it's so intense that it really affects a larger population. There's millions and millions of people out here that are suffering with this thing called depression. And as you relocated now, you're starting a whole new life somewhere where you're really not prepared for. So you had to pick up again and start over again.
Exactly. And, my body was breaking down, but there were certain things that were just happening that just didn't set well with me. And I knew that it was majorly abnormal. But the thing about depression with me, everyone knew that I'd moved all the way on the West Coast. So I was embarrassed. I was humiliated, and I didn't want anyone to know what I was going through. So in order for me not to let anyone know what I was going through, I would avoid people's phone calls. So I wouldn't answer phone calls from my daughter or my mother as often as they called me, because I knew there was one question that they were going to ask me, and that was the question that I wanted to avoid. And that question is, how are you?
How are you? And you didn't want them to know the other side of how are you doing, that you weren't doing what you expected to be doing.
Right. And looking back now,
get them upset.
I should have said something a long time ago. I should have just blurted it out immediately. That's what I should have done, but I didn't. And I let it build and build. And then I got mad at God. And I started resenting God. And I also was thinking, because I do believe some people call it karma, but I call it good old fashioned reaping what you sow.
Yeah.
And I was thinking back on my life, what did I do so horrible to deserve this? What did I do? And I started beating myself up. I started resenting God. I stopped praying. I didn't want to have anything to do with God. But my mind was so conditioned to pray, I would catch myself praying and then stop.
Because you were allowing the hurt, unbeknown to you, to conquer more of you than you were at that point having more faith. Where your faith needed to increase, it was decreasing because of your hurt and your shame and the humiliation of having moved from one state to another, and the possibility now you're faced with, I have to go back. So your faith,
and go back to nothing.
faith, had dwindled down. So at that point, as you said, when you lose hope in Christ and you're battling this state of depression and this relationship that just didn't blossom the way you had hoped to, at this point, how was your mate at that time? How did he handle these ill feelings that you were now having? How did your relationship work there?
Well, relationship, that's really being generous saying that, because that's not what it was. I mean, he would leave 5 in the morning and come back midnight every now and then. And then when I questioned him about it, he would laugh. He thought it was funny. And the more he laughed, the more I was ready to wring that neck, to be honest. But I didn't do that, of course, but I really resented everything. I resented everything. And I felt like this was a waste of my time, a waste of my life. And now I don't have a place to live. I don't have a vehicle. My family is not here. I'm sick and I'm going to die in Washington State. That's what I thought.
So you were more depending on him for everything, because you now were not working, you weren't doing anything. You moved there to regroup yourself, and the relationship just didn't pan out. And I know that I read too also that depression, it affects over like 490 million people in terms of the workplace, because of that illness, they don't work.
And I'll tell you something else. I don't know if you've ever been to Washington State. I was south of Seattle. Okay, that area, it rains 9 months out of the year. So if you're depressed, it's rainy and gloomy everywhere. I don't think a person in that mind state should even be in that area.
How long did you allow this relationship to continue before you were able to pick up and return either back home or to move forward?
I was there 4 years.
That's a long time to be in pain. And doing that.
And I was, like I said, I was sick. Whenever the doctor told me, because they knew something was wrong, my health was declining, my hair was coming out. You could even see my scalp, my hair was so thin. Everything was just, I was just disappearing into nothing, And I just think that when the doctor told me to make a living will, I knew that it was serious. And when the doctor asked me, who did I want to be my emergency contact? And I said, I don't want anyone to be my emergency contact. If something happens to me, these people are on the East Coast, my family, so they can't get here in 15 minutes anyway. So I'm not putting anybody down. And the doctor said, well, we would like you to put someone down as an emergency contact. If you like, we'll only contact them if you're unresponsive. And I said, that's the only way that I want you to contact my family, if I'm unresponsive.
So while you were going back and forth to the doctor and you stated earlier that you weren't working, so how were your medical bills and your necessities being afforded to you? How were you maintaining that?
I had to apply for government assistance. And in Washington State, they have extended Medicaid. And that's what I had. Extended Medicaid is for people who are in my age group. We don't have children, and we're just a part of an expanded part of American society that is not, don't have whatever the specifications are, like in the southern areas, it gives you more leeway, so you qualify. And that's what happened to me.
So you were actually disabled because of these illnesses that were now upon you in terms of the depression and all the physical disparities that were getting you. So you were not able to go look for work and you were not able to actually work because of that.
You're absolutely right. In fact, right before I left, I had applied for disability. And I had an attorney and everything. And when God healed me, I called him and told him I didn't need him any longer.
And you know, I don't want to keep pounding on the relationship because you lived with this guy 4 years. So what kind of financial support did he provide to you?
Well, he gave me, I think, maybe $100 a week.
And with that $100, that was supposed to cover your necessities, or was it to cover the household needs?
My personal necessities.
And was he supportive in terms of you going back and forth to the doctor? Did he go to any doctor visits with you?
No, I caught an Uber. I even walked to the hospital once.
Now that is really amazing that he did not support you either physically and minimally financially, but yet you stayed 4 years. And I would say that's contributed to your state of mind, your state of being, that you didn't want to go back because you left and gave up everything back home. And now you're, like you said, way across the land, and only to get yourself into a situation that you thought was going to be a real miracle, a life-changing situation. And in so many ways, it was a life-changing situation.
It certainly was life-changing.
In an unexpected way. And so you've gone through the doctor and you've gone through these periods of depression. So how have you come out of that state to where you are now?
Let me just tell you that God is phenomenal. He will use anyone or anything. Like in the Bible, he used a donkey, so he'll use anything.
That he will.
It just so happened that a cousin of mine called me, which is not a big deal. But to me, it was a big deal because I haven't spoken to her since 1995 or 1997. And she called me one day out of the blue. And she said, "How are you doing?" And before she could get it out, I had done something I'd never done before. I just blurted everything out. I said, "I'm sick and I don't want to die in Washington State."
And you responded that way because you had previously stated when your mom would call you and your daughter would call you, you kind of in so many ways didn't answer the phone. And when you did, it was very vague in conversation. So at this point, you would consider that this was the moment of release, that you needed to be set free from those inner feelings. And, you know, you had stated also that there was a period of time where, you know, you strayed away from the Lord because you really weren't praying the way you needed to pray and your belief had dwindled. So at what point now has your faith become increased, and how did it increase as you were still going through this situation prior to being set totally free?
That's an excellent question. After my cousin told me, she said, "Look, I live in Arlington, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia. The DMV, it's Northern Virginia, Maryland, and DC all together. They're within like a few miles away from each other." She said, "You come here." Now, my cousin is a colonel well, she's retired now. She's a colonel in the United States Army. And she said, you come with me. You don't have to worry about money. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about a place to stay. We have the best doctors in the nation here. You come here, don't worry about anything. And when you get on your feet, you can go. You let me know when you're ready to leave, and I will get your plane ticket. And can you believe when she said that, I started feeling better. I haven't had any symptoms since.
That was the release, the outlet that you needed, and God's divine way of opening another door for you, because he saw you, he knew what, he'll allow us to go through things sometimes just to get our attention. And I would say from a personal level that yes, he allowed you to go through that so that you could get through and to share what you're sharing with others. Well, our time is winding down. So if you would share with others who may listen to this or they're seeing your video today, and they want to know what could they possibly do different, or just give us some words of encouragement for that other person that may be battling depression.
Well, I will say this. If you're battling depression, you're not by yourself. If you have any type of age on you, you've been through something. It may not be depression, but you've been through something. And if you haven't, you just keep living, because you will. You're not by yourself. You're not alone. And what depression wants to do is to isolate you, in my case, even more so than I already was. Don't isolate yourself, and take baby steps. If you can't get out of the bed today, maybe when you get out of the bed tomorrow, walk to the bathroom and wash up. If you can't put on your clothes today, that day, that's fine. The next day when you wash up, put on your clothes. Just baby steps. And believe in God. He's real, and he will help you if you don't close your heart to him.
One day at a time, one step at a time.
Day at a time.
What is your career path? What are you doing now that you've relocated and you're kind of back to where you need to be or where you'd like to be? Share with us briefly, because we are running out of time. What are you doing now that has really made your life so different, so brand new?
It has, and I feel like even as a child, I always knew that I wanted to help people. And depression is one of those things where a light needs to be shined on that. But in certain communities, it's kind of like swept under the rug and kind of like silent. You're kind of silent about it. But I feel like had I not gone through what I went through, nobody would have been adequately equipped to explain to me what actually goes on, how your mind actually functions, And with that information, I feel like I said, I'm supposed to help people. I've written a book. It's an audio book. I've started a podcast, and everything is for the Lord. It's for the glory of God.
And the name of your book is, what is the name of your book?
My book is called By Faith. And those are the scriptures that I actually used when I was clawing myself out of depression.
So you're writing and you're doing your podcast. That's what you're focused on right now?
Yes, I'm focused on my podcast, definitely. I've only had my podcast a few months, but I'm very happy about it.
And career path is just writing right now?
I want to write. I want to stay in radio broadcasting, not necessarily on the air, but I'm pretty good at production. I'm pretty good at copywriting, so I've been doing things like that.
That's awesome. Well, we are out of time, but I do want to thank you, Ms. Stone, for being my guest today on A Place Called Through and sharing your testimony about going through depression. And we invite you back later on to come back and, let's follow up with you to see where you are and how well you are. And look at the favor of God on your life and share that testimony with someone else that may be still struggling. Again, I do thank you wholeheartedly for being my guest today on A Place Called Through, broadcasting, as we said, from WYTV7, Christian Broadcasters Network. And if you'd like to be my guest to my listeners or my viewers, please feel free to reach out to me, pgoingswp@gmail.com, or you may reach me through WYTV7, Christian Broadcasters Network. Again, I thank you. God bless you so much. And to our listeners and to our viewers, we want to wish everybody to be safe, trusting God, for we do know that our nation is a state of crisis right now. But through Christ, all things are possible if we do believe. Believe to you, my guest today. Keep believing, trusting God. And to the listeners and viewers, believe God is able to do all things. God bless you all.